With the Othello extract question, you have plenty of time to answer it in this exam. You can see that the exam in itself is 2 hours 30 minutes long and you have 3 questions to answer. And if you break it down, that gives you 15 minutes per question. And so really when you're starting with section A, where you're given that Othello extract and the question is here and it is always the same, you can really spend some time planning, at least 10 minutes, so that you're really confident with the quality of the ideas before you start to write up your exam answer. And this presentation is going to take you through and talk you through how I would go about reading and therefore annotating the extract in order then to help me plan and pull my ideas together. This will kind of take you step through the thinking and the reading process. Obviously, I'm talking about an extract here, but you can apply the same procedure to any extract from Othello. So if you ever get stuck or you're a bit unsure about how to approach the question, come back to this video, watch it again, listen again, and then go through the steps to help you get really confident. Now, I've already mentioned that the exam question is always the same, but just as with any exam question, it's really important that you don't ignore it and you're aware of the keywords of this question. This is an explore the significance question, and that word significance is hugely important to get right for AQA. It's not what is important, but it's what different ideas, what different meanings are being created, and how are these meanings or these ideas helping take the tragedy of the play forward. So we're combining our knowledge of tragedy and the genre and the key ideas that work within the genre of tragedy, and we're looking at an extract and thinking, okay, why has Shakespeare written this particular moment? Why include this conversation, this episode? What different meanings is he presenting to the audience in order to make us understand how the tragedy is unfolding? And all of the time, we absolutely have to be aware of Shakespeare's dramatic methods. And in knowing this and in zooming in on these 3 key moments in this question, that will really help me read and therefore annotate and plan my response to this question. So before I talk you through the thinking and the reading process, here's just an example of an extract that I have annotated in the past, just so that you get a sense of the level of detail that you ought to be able to get down in about 10 minutes. The better you know the play, the more you practice this, the quicker you will get. But I want you to be aware that, if you've not really thought about the extract in detail as I have here, you should not be starting your exam answer, because you won't really know what it is that you want to say. So by the time you've listened to this presentation and you've worked through a number of extracts, this is the kind of end model that you'll be looking for. Imagine that this is my extract. You could have any extract from Othello in front of you here. It doesn't matter which one you work on. But this is me. I'm in the exam. I'm faced with this extract. I know what my question is. I know it's from Act 2, Scene 1. What do I do? Where do I start? What is my thinking process going to be? And how is my thinking going to inform my reading and my annotations? So my first read through, I'm going to be reading through with me thinking, okay, what is the narrative of this particular extract? What story is unfolding here? And in order to do that, and I might just kind of read it through very quickly once, the first question I'd really ask myself is, what has happened that has led up to this moment? Now, obviously, depending upon where that is in the play, more or less might have happened. But crucially, it's not just kind of what's happened in the act before or the scene before, but actually what lines have led up to this moment. So with that extract in front of me, and mine was from Act 2, Scene 1, by the time I've got to the exam, I know the play incredibly well. I've listened to it and I've watched it and I've read it so many times that I instinctively know what has happened. But if I'm not at that stage and I'm still learning about Othello and I'm still learning how to do this response, I'm going to go back to my text and find out, well, what has happened immediately before this moment. And in doing that, with the extract that I'm working from, I'm aware that actually Iago's dialogue, which begins my extract, is actually halfway through a piece of dialogue that he is speaking to Roderigo. And if I hadn't gone back to my text, I probably wouldn't have known that. And actually the conversation that has led up to the extract that I've been given is Iago trying to provoke Roderigo in order that Roderigo provoke Cassio, which is what the extract presents. So prior to this extract, Iago is talking to Roderigo and saying, did you notice this? Look at how Desdemona and Cassio are speaking with one another and how they're touching one another and their breaths are almost intermingling. He's trying to paint this picture in Roderigo's head, convince him of Iago and Cassio's infidelity in order for, once we get to the extract, for Roderigo then to listen to Iago and follow the instructions that Iago is going to give him. Now, me establishing that narrative prior to the extract is massively important, because it allows me to understand the subtlety of what's happening in the extract in far more detail than saying, actually, it's from Act 2, Scene 1. This is the moment where Othello and Desdemona have arrived safely after the storm in Cyprus, and now Iago's starting to make his plan work. That's okay, but in me knowing exactly what has led up to this moment, I am much more astutely aware of the subtleties of Iago's planning and how he's led Roderigo up until this moment of the extract. Still working on this first reading, I've pinned down what's led up to this extract. Now it's vital that I actually pin down the story of the extract itself and the shape of the extract. 3 questions here, which I would have in my mind and I'd be absolutely looking for. How is it beginning? They've chosen this extract, the exam board, for a very particular reason. Where it starts isn't hazard, it isn't by chance, it's because they've deliberately thought there's an interesting moment at the start. So how does it begin? Who is speaking? Who is on stage? How are they interacting? And then how does the narrative, how does the conversation between these characters develop? Is it talking about one particular thing all of the way through? Do they shift the topic of conversation or focus throughout this extract? And if you are used to boxing up extracts from GCSE, this would be a really helpful thing to do here. What is each piece of dialogue? What's its function? What's its purpose? What are they talking about? And I would make a note of that as I'm annotating. So I've got kind of a modern English version summary of the structure of the conversation and what is being spoken about. And then I would absolutely make sure, just as I've spoken about the importance of the start of the extract, that I'm really mindful of how it ends. Again, the exam board have chosen to cut off the extract at that particular moment. So why? How does the extract end? Why at that moment? What are the implications for what is to come? And how is the audience feeling by the time they've watched this little extract unfold? So I've done my first reading, and my first reading, just to remind you, is all about the story of the extract. Who is there? What are they speaking about? Why are they speaking about these things? So I've really got a sense of the narrative and how the storyline of that narrative fits into the wider tragedy of the play. Then, though, I know that my question tells me that I need to be talking about Shakespeare's dramatic methods as well. And this will be very different. I'll be commenting on different things depending upon the extract that I have been given. However, these are 6 things which I think are kind of vital to be aware of, and almost in terms of my preparation for the exam, I would learn these things. I have to look for these things. They might not all be there, they might not all be relevant, but certainly if I'm thinking about dramatic methods, it would be foolish of me to not know these things and not know what to look for. I would also in the exam have a different coloured pen, a different coloured highlighter. So on the one hand, in one colour, I've got my reading 1 with all of my narrative ideas pinned down. With my second reading, where I'm looking at, well, how is Shakespeare bringing this scene alive to me to make me understand what it is that I understand about the narrative, I would have that in a different colour. And as I say, 6 things to look for. They will be different depending upon the extract that we've got. For example, in mine, the structural placement is still kind of in that moment between the exposition and the climax, because it's at the start of the play, so ideas are unfurling at this moment, they're gaining momentum, but they haven't actually reached disastrous consequences yet. So obviously that would be different if I had an extract from Act 5. I would be absolutely looking for stage directions, and as I'm reading through, I'd be highlighting any of them to make me very aware of who not just is on stage, but who is coming onto stage maybe partway through this extract or leaving the stage, who is on stage but maybe just observing, not participating, because that might open up an interesting number of questions as well. There might also be physical actions. Remember, this is a play, it's meant to be performed, it's meant to be seen. So if Shakespeare is deliberately telling me these things, then I would be absolutely highlighting to be aware of them. The structure of the dialogue, again, I think is something that you can always look for regardless of the extract, looking at the exchange between the people on stage. And crucially, as there is in my extract, because there are only 2 characters and then Roderigo leaves, I'm aware that the last part of my extract is the soliloquy. And again, if I wasn't mindful of entrances and exits, I would miss that really important point that here is Iago speaking directly his thoughts to us, the audience, where no one else can hear him. And that obviously changed the dramatic relationship between Iago and the audience at this moment. Relationships between characters on stage absolutely can be spoken about regardless of the extract, and that would tie in with the structure of the dialogue and how they're speaking to one another. Number 5, I've probably already addressed when I did my first reading, but if I haven't, here's a reminder to make sure that I do. And then finally, number 6, looking at language. Key point here, please do not comment on individual words and say a lot about a little, which you might have really developed doing at GCSE. Here at A level, to make it more sophisticated, we're looking at patterns in language. So only comment on individual words if you can see how words are working together. For example, using specific images that run throughout, perhaps as a motif or a semantic field, and perhaps there are real contrasts in language between the beginning and the end, perhaps it's naming conventions. But unless it forms a particular pattern within the extract, avoid talking about individual features of language. Rather, focus on 1 to 5, which are the structural, the much cleverer, bigger ideas about the extract and how Shakespeare is shaping his meaning. So to go back to the extract that I previously annotated that I showed you earlier on in this presentation, you can see I do have different colours working here. And I just want to kind of really stress that to you, that I think that this is a really helpful way to work in, because I know that, for example, my blue and my bits with the narrative content going on. My orange is when I'm talking about specific narrative methods. You can see I've highlighted in pink 2 specific stage directions, so they're standing out to me. This means I'm not going to be missing really important details when I come to write up. So I have annotated, but I'm not quite ready to write up just yet. I've done my first reading and I've established the narrative content. I've done my second reading when I'm looking at Shakespeare's dramatic methods. But before I need to write up now, I need to get myself a plan established. So using my understanding of the narrative and the ways in which Shakespeare gets this across using his different methods, I've got to go back to that question, explore the significance of this extract in relation to the tragedy of the play as a whole. What is happening in this extract? And I've got to establish 3, maybe 4, but 3 would be enough, key ideas to form each one of my paragraphs. These might develop, each of these paragraphs might tie into perhaps how different characters are playing a role within the developing tragedy. It might be key themes that are being established, perhaps kind of the contrast between appearance and reality, for example. It might be key tragic concepts, looking at Othello's perhaps increasing isolation, or it might be to do with Iago as the tragic villain and what I'm learning about him at that stage. Again, those ideas will be massively different depending upon the extract that you're working on. But once I've done my 2 different types of reading and I've annotated my extract, I've got to think about, well, what are my big ideas to lead my discussion forward? And that from there, then I can then go back to my extract and think, okay, my first idea is going to be about this. And so therefore I'm going to talk about this and this and this for my extract. And I can almost start to number my extract with, well, I'm going to use that for my idea 1, that for my idea 2, and that for my idea 3. That therefore helps me get a very coherent pattern going through my extract. Coherent is the descriptor for band 4, so people who are aiming for B grades and above. And if I've really annotated my extract and I've really thought about what my ideas are and what bits of the extract work for each idea, I know I've got something which is coherent and also thorough, and hopefully my analysis, I can move it into band 5 by being perceptive in my interpretations. One final kind of word of warning with this kind of planning and reading. Remember, the question is exploring the extract in relation to the tragedy as a whole, and that could mislead you slightly, and you might think that you're writing lots about what happens in the rest of the play. You are not. I would say, as a rule of thumb, at least 80% of your answer needs to be on the extract. You are relating it to the play as a whole by saying about, well, why the extract is important, what later action it leads into, but you're not having to analyse or comment on that later action. You are just analysing and commenting on the extract. So again, that's why this kind of reading through and this thoroughness of this preparation is massively important, to make sure you don't lose focus of what the question is really asking you to do. So best of luck. Section A, the Othello extract question for this exam, is one that you can absolutely prepare for. You can practice this structure and this reading for a number of extracts. You should go into the exam feeling really confident, but you've got to put in the time now to practice reading in this very methodical and very thorough way. Best of luck.